Forget the comfort of soft mattresses, warm fireplaces, and cozy blankets. In the Middle Ages, the night was not a time of rest, it was a battle for survival. The cold crept through stone walls, straw beds scratched your skin, and the only warmth came from huddling together like animals. Outside, wolves howled, the wind clawed at wooden doors, and every shadow whispered danger. Sleep wasn't a luxury, it was a gamble with the darkness itself. This is how medieval people truly survived the night. Imagine the coldest night you have ever felt in your life. Now strip away the heater, the thick blanket, the insulated walls. Imagine no glass windows, no padded bed, no electric light, only the sting of winter air seeping through every crack in the wood and stone. For people in the Middle Ages, this was not imagination. This was reality. Every single winter, the night was not merely a time for rest. It was a battle for survival, a fight against frost that could claim the young, the old, and the weak before the first rooster crowed. And yet, somehow, people survived. Not just for one night, not for one winter, but for centuries. Tonight, we step back into that world to uncover exactly how medieval people endured nights so bitter that even strong men shivered to their bones. The secret begins with the houses themselves. At first glance, the medieval home was no fortress against the cold. In villages, peasants lived in small one-room huts with walls made of wattle and daub, a frame of sticks smeared with clay and mud. These walls cracked, shifted, and let in drafts. Roofs were thatched straw, often leaking and sagging under snow. Floors were dirt, sometimes covered with rushes, often damp and frozen. And yet, within these unpromising shelters, families found ways to generate warmth. They huddled close, pressed together, not out of affection but necessity. Brothers, sisters, parents, even grandparents piled into one straw bed, with layers of rags and wool cloaks thrown over them. The warmth of bodies was itself a resource, conserved carefully through the night. And when even that was not enough, peasants turned to their most unlikely allies. Animals, pigs, sheep, goats, sometimes even a cow, were brought indoors. Not because space was plenty, but because body heat meant survival. To sleep beside a pig was unpleasant, but to freeze was far worse. In fact, this practice was so common that many medieval writers joked about peasants having barnyards for bedrooms. But not everyone lived in a hut. Nobles had stone castles or timber halls, massive structures with thick walls that promised safety. Yet even the grandest castle was no guarantee against the cold. Stone walls absorbed chill, radiating it inward until even a lord's chamber was icy. Windows, if present, were not glass but oiled parchment or wooden shutters, hardly effective against the wind. Drafts whistled through every crack. And so, the noble strategy was fire. Huge, roaring hearths that blazed day and night. In the great hall, fires were built so large that whole trees might be thrown into them. But even this heat often failed to reach the far corners. Guests at feasts wrote of needing cloaks and gloves despite the enormous flames at the center of the room. A noble might sleep under layers of fur, velvet quilts, and feather mattresses, yet still wake to frost clinging to the edges of the bed curtains. Curtains themselves became an essential medieval invention, not for decoration, but for insulation. Wealthy households enclosed beds with heavy drapes, creating a miniature tent within the room. This trapped body heat and firelight, turning a freezing chamber into a pocket of tolerable warmth. Some beds were built as box beds, enclosed on all sides with only a small door to crawl through. Imagine sealing yourself in a wooden cupboard just to keep the night at bay. That was medieval luxury. Meanwhile, peasants had their own rough equivalents. Some slept in alcoves built into the walls, like wooden cubbies that trapped heat. Others constructed sleeping platforms above animal stalls, where rising heat from livestock provided natural underfloor heating. The poorest relied on fire, but a fire in a thatched hut was a dangerous gamble. Chimneys were rare. Smoke vented through a hole in the roof, filling the room before it escaped. Families slept half-blinded by smoke, coughing, eyes watering but alive, because the alternative was to let the fire die and freeze. In fact, medieval sources tell us that people often slept sitting up, propped by pillows, because lying flat in the smoky air was suffocating. The belief that sitting upright was healthier was partly born of necessity. The rhythm of sleep itself was different. In an age without electric light, darkness dictated life. Medieval people followed what scholars now call segmented sleep. They went to bed shortly after dusk, slept for 4 or 5 hours, then woke around midnight. This waking period was called the watch. For an hour or two, people prayed, mended clothes, tended fires, or even visited neighbors by torchlight. Then they returned to bed for a second sleep until dawn. This pattern conserved firewood, no need to keep huge flames burning all night, and allowed people to check on animals, children, and coals. In the coldest nights, the watch was survival time, when someone stirred the embers to keep them glowing, when fathers stoked the hearth so children would wake to warmth, not frostbite. Of course, survival was also a matter of clothing. At night, peasants and nobles alike wore night rails or shifts-long loose linen garments. But in winter, layers were piled on, wool tunics, hose, even cloaks were worn to bed. Wealthier sleepers had fur-lined gowns, while peasants might stuff straw inside blankets for insulation. Socks were rare, but feet were wrapped in rags. Some even wore gloves to bed, though the poor made do with bare hands under armpits. Then came food, the body's furnace. To face a medieval night without a full stomach was misery. Porridges, pottages, thick stews of beans, oats, and root vegetables were eaten at supper. Nobles dined on roasted meats, rich pies, and spiced wine. All this food built internal heat, essential for lasting through the night. And drink mattered, too. Ale, mead, and mulled wine provided warmth and calories. Even children drank weak ale, safer than cold water and better for warming the body. But let's not imagine that everyone survived. Winter nights were killers. Records from monasteries, towns, and villages describe elderly folk who never woke after a cold snap, children who froze when fires went out, travelers found stiff on the road by morning. Entire armies perished when caught in winter campaigns. Chroniclers wrote of soldiers who lit fires only to have them smothered by snow, men who lay down in cloaks and were found frozen where they slept. To survive the night was to endure a quiet, constant danger, a danger that haunted every family. And yet, out of this struggle, traditions were born. Songs, prayers, and charms were recited before bed, invoking protection from frost and from spirits thought to haunt the cold dark. Superstitions claimed that evil creatures prowled most fiercely in winter nights, preying on those who left fires unguarded. So fires were not just physical protection, they were spiritual beacons. The glow of a hearth was both warmth and ward, a promise against the terrors outside. For the wealthy, nights became occasions of storytelling, music, and companionship. Halls echoed with tales of knights, saints, and wonders, told by firelight while servants tended flames. For peasants, the night meant whispered conversations in the straw. Families pressed so close they shared dreams and nightmares. And for everyone, survival demanded community. Alone, a man might freeze. Together, even the poorest family could make it through. Consider also how nights shaped medieval medicine. Doctors of the age believed that cold corrupted the humors of the body. They prescribed warm drinks, heated stones wrapped in cloth placed at the feet, even sleeping with dogs for warmth. The advice may sound strange, but in desperate nights, every remedy mattered. To sleep was to risk never waking. To keep warm was to guard life itself. By dawn, those who survived emerged into pale sunlight, their breath still visible in the air. Ashes were stirred, fires rebuilt, animals fed, life resumed, but the memory of the night lingered. Medieval people feared winter with reason. It killed silently, relentlessly, sparing only those who knew its tricks. And yet, they endured, century after century, shaping habits and traditions that echo faintly even now. Our warm beds, our glass windows, our late-night snacks by the heater, they are luxuries built on the survival of ancestors who once huddled in smoke-filled huts, whispering prayers as the frost crept closer. So when you tuck yourself in tonight, remember this: your blanket is thicker than a medieval quilt, your walls tighter than a stone castle, your heater stronger than any hearth. You sleep in comfort purchased by centuries of struggle. And maybe, just maybe, those medieval nights were not only harsher but also richer in the closeness, the shared warmth, the resilience that kept entire generations alive when every breath turned to frost. Because survival was never guaranteed, it was earned. Every single night,